Here. Chairman Maturo,
Here.
Rex Sims.
Here.
Robert Bornstein.
Here.
Tony Rascio.
Here.
I would thank you. I would like to welcome our two new members, Bob and Tony.
Thank you.
For being here. We're happy to have you. So
Yes.
thank
Pleasure, and
Yes.
we thank you for choosing.
For the
At least
next-
Myself, I don't know if Tony feels the same.
No, yeah, I mean,
you. For the
You
next
just showed
meeting,
up this morning, right, Tony?
We'll have a handout with everybody's name and phone number and stuff. You need to get hold of everybody.
Okay.
But you can't call them and talk to them about anything.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Remember Sunshine Law.
You might want to talk to them
Number,
about
but
that.
Don't call
Yeah,
them.
yeah. You going, that's fine.
We're going to review the following ordinance for consistency with the City of Bonita Springs Comprehensive Plan. And that, do you want to read that, or do you want me to read all this? You want me to read it? Okay. An ordinance of the City of Bonita Springs, Florida, amending Division 37, Subdivision 2, temporary uses, and Subdivision 3, mobile food vendors of the Land Development Code relating to mobile food vendors, providing for severability, conflicts, codification, scrivener's errors, and providing for an effective date. Have any public comments on that?
Yeah. Go for it.
Well, we have a public.
Oh, we do.
You can stand right there.
Dawn Konczakowski, and I just want to thank the city council and the city attorney for maintaining the number 10 food truck sites aren't allowed on Little Hickory Island. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Okay.
Go through it now.
Chairman, I'll just kind of get us started on this, and then we can take your opinions and comments. The city currently has standards for food trucks that were created several years ago, not that long. And under that situation, or under that environment, there was concern that the food trucks would provide unfair competition for restaurants in certain sections of the city. And the regulations were written in that light. We allow for 5 permitted food trucks within the city. One of them is I'll call a semi-permanent location along Old 41. Those other 4 can be located anywhere that they're permitted. Right now, all 4 of those permits are located or associated with the area by Momentum Brewery out on Bonita Beach Road east of the interstate. And recently, there has been interest in expanding the number of food trucks that can operate within the city. Council heard those concerns, asked staff to revise the regulations to allow for that, but still provide some guidance as to where they can go and how they can operate. What you are looking at, the draft before you, is supposedly crafted to address those concerns and still provide those standards. The public comment you received is correct. We are still looking to keep food trucks off of Little Hickory Island. There was also some discussion of the downtown district. Council had made some comments, and I think we're going to be discussing this with them when it gets presented to them next Wednesday, I believe. So right now, the document you have before you is presented to you to determine whether it is consistent and compatible with the comprehensive plan. So with that, whatever comments you may have or questions you have, I'm happy to take it from here.
Rex?
I just have a couple of little quick comments, and one of them is on the second page, and it specifically mentions that these regulations do not encompass ice cream trucks. And the thing that kind of is interesting to me is that ice cream trucks are really not licensed at all in Bonita. They can come to town and spend the day and leave, and we don't know who these people are. And I think that's something that needs to be addressed. But the other question I have is on the next page, it says permit required up here, and it says for the proposed location upon which the vendor will operate, period.
Oh, yes. I see you.
How does that, how do we establish that?
Well, that is written in that way because running parallel with our attempt to modify our regulations is the legislature's attempt to deregulate food trucks. So what we are trying to do is provide for the ability to regulate the use of land and get away from the regulation of the trucks themselves.
Okay, so we're essentially, if they meet the state requirement, they're good with us.
We are only, for the trucks themselves, we are only asking that they provide evidence that all
Right.
the inspections and
All right,
certifications are.
and then the other question I have is back under general standards, under 8 down there. Mobile food vehicle cannot be permitted within 250 feet of another permitted location.
Correct.
Now, location, could that mean a restaurant or a place providing food services?
It would be another food truck or a food truck park, but I can be more specific with that in the language.
But this wouldn't be
No, it would not be a restaurant.
would not be a restaurant. We ought to say that.
I would be happy to put that in.
Okay. The other thing that comes up on the last mobile home food vendor park, which is a very interesting thing, but it talks about central water and sewer must be provided to all mobile food vendors and the general public. Okay, that's understood, but it omits one of the major stumbling blocks in this is the grease trap.
Right, I saw that.
That would be permitted by BSU. We are not waiving that requirement. We are just not necessarily the ones that establish that standard. And that standard for the calculation is already within our.
Because the city doesn't issue that, it's a utility.
We work with BSU to permit, but it is ultimately their utility.
Okay, but that's the most important thing.
Correct, and we are not waiving that requirement.
Okay. Okay, and then I've got a note under 3, can only co-locate with a site of existing uses if those tenants of those legal uses have no objection. And then the existing uses parking. Are we double counting the parking, or are there any parking requirements for mobile food park?
There are requirements that are associated with this document. And if you look under number 6, parking will be provided at 3 spaces per mobile food vendor plus 1 additional parking space per 15.
That's exactly what I had marked. Then my note down at the bottom says, if it's already a shopping center or something, or a establishment that has a development order that has a specific number of parking spaces required, can we count these twice?
No, sir. The only way you could count parking spaces twice is if you have businesses that operate during different hours. So if a shopping center closes at 5, and I don't
Oh, and
know
this
what to
is
do, and that
after
food truck park opened at 5:01, then you could at least consider. But under what you've read, no, you would not count them twice.
Well, that's not very clear, I don't think.
It's not in the park regulations, we know, but we basically, it's not even, we didn't even put a calculation for the vendors under the general standards for when they locate at existing locations on a park, because we're gonna be, as an application criteria, we're gonna ask them a lot of questions like, what's the size of their vehicle, or show us the site plan of the footprint so we know how many parking spaces they're impacting, and also are they gonna have tables and chairs in other areas, so we wanna get an idea of how much impact they're gonna have on existing parking before the calculus is made of how much additional parking they need. So there's there's no standard in there because it's going to be done on a case-by-case basis with the recommendation of staff saying this site is inadequately parked based on whatever the existing parking is. Because if there was a Home Depot or something, they've probably got excessive parking, so it's not going to be an issue. So staff didn't want to take the position of guessing what the parking requirements would be for a food truck. They want to look at them individually, one by one.
But if you have multiple food trucks, this multiplies.
Yes, but that would be that's why you have that in a food truck park, and so that's why
Yes,
there
that's
are
what I'm talking
standards
about,
there.
right? Food vendor park back here under 2159. So if you had 4 of them, the requirements here would multiply by 4.
We currently have 5 permits right now for food
Yes, sir.
trucks. What's the city planning on going to?
0.
We don't know.
What's going to happen is, as you transition into these regulations, we would permit the locations, and the permits for the trucks themselves would simply disappear.
That's it for me.
Question here. John, we don't have any vendor parks at this time.
No, sir.
I know that Naples has one south. It's pretty large, it's right on the river there, I think, it's pretty nice.
Celebration Park.
Mhm. Yeah, has anyone approached the city yet to develop one of these parks?
We've had conversations, but nobody's filed an application. I think most people are waiting to see what happens with this ordinance before they take anything forward.
Now, in terms of, this is a large venue, it's not like one or two that, Brian, so it's a large venue, if you will. Where would that be, how would that be zoned, and where would that occur in the city? Because it takes up quite a bit of property to do this.
It does, and we haven't gotten into this, but the discussions with city council, I've tried to outline to them there are two very distinct applications that are included in this ordinance. A food truck has certain impacts. They tend to be limited, and what we try to do is set the stage so that when somebody asks for a location, we can address those. But they're much smaller by comparison. A food truck park is essentially permitting an outdoor restaurant or an outdoor bar. And the noise, the parking, the things that go along with those type of uses are going to be more substantial when you mitigate for those factors. And that's why you may not see specific standards included in the regulations, but what we're trying to do is allow ourselves to review each of these case by case, like the city attorney outlined. Because depending on where they go or where they want to locate, those impacts can be vastly different. We've had conversations with somebody that wanted to locate one on the water. We've had another one where somebody wanted to locate one downtown. Vastly different.
And I give you an example of, I was in Naples when the code enforcement case was brought against Celebration Park. So Celebration Park is in a residential neighborhood. It's across the canal from houses. They didn't receive any permits or authority. They just went in there, started building, and put the facility in place. So by the time the code enforcement process had started to go forward, and the neighbors had been actually, from what I recall from the hearings, had been pretty okay with it until it started to become really too much of a nuisance. The issue was it had become very popular, and people saw the need for it, and it was one of those situations where they asked forgiveness rather than for permission. And so we've moved the regulations from looking at the individual vendors to putting this on the property owner. The property owner is responsible now for the vendors that come in and the impacts on the neighbors. So everything is given more of a site-specific approach.
I mean, I would think that it would be regulated, but it really poses a real problem to restaurants in the area because it's a different venue for food. A whole different attitude about buying food and so forth. It's like being at a carnival, not like sitting in a restaurant. So I would think, as a restaurant owner, I would be really concerned about a park, not a vendor, but a park located even near me. I mean, with a mile of me.
I do not run a restaurant, so I'm not going to claim to be a current expert, but I was a busboy previously, and
I got a busboy look.
What I know when you compare food trucks to restaurants, just from my perspective, and it is not the operating of a restaurant perspective, is that a restaurant is more expensive to establish, it's more expensive to run, the fees are higher, costs are higher, the building is obviously more expensive. But with that, you have the ability to sell alcohol, you have the ability to establish an ambiance, you have the ability to broaden your menu, you have the ability to prepare more meals in a shorter period of time because your kitchen is larger. A food truck is much smaller, obviously more mobile, which has its benefits and detriments because you're never in the same place permanently. And you do not, under these regulations, if you're in a park, you may, but as an individual food truck, you do not have the ability to sell alcohol. You don't have the ability to establish what you would have as an atmosphere within a building. And those that come to you, especially in the summertime, you are probably not going to hang around too long because 95 degrees and 90% humidity does not lend itself to a lengthy lunchtime lingering, especially if you have to go back to work. So there are benefits that a truck has that a restaurant doesn't have and vice versa. So when you try to compare the two and state that one is taking away business from the other, it's very easy for me to provide my opinion because it's not my income that's being addressed. But from my perspective, the two are vastly different. And I don't see how, if I make a decision to go to a restaurant or a food truck, the thought of going to the other really enters my mind. There's a schedule, there's almost a routine with both.
That being said, when you have a food park, a vendor park, we're actually talking about when together, considered together, is a structure. begins to be a structure. I
Yes.
mean, it's taking on mass. And due to that, you now have, in essence, a kind of a restaurant. Now, these people can have tents, they can have cover, they can have shade. As a restaurant, you can apply for a beer and liquor permit. Sooner or later, these people, because they're now a mass of something going on, will apply for the same thing. So this thing could really snowball into something larger than just one food vendor.
It can, and that's why we've addressed the possibility of not only having individual vendors, but also having parks. But at the same time, you have to look at the fact that the city has more than one Italian restaurant, and both of them are still existing. So we are not looking to inhibit or promote competition. We are simply permitting the use of land. And in terms of the argument that a food truck is unfair competition to a restaurant, I can provide you my opinion, but I am not the authority. But that is also not what we are looking at here. We're not looking to establish or determine who can compete with who where. We're simply looking at the use of land and how it should be applied.
Now, I also can say one final thing, architecture. We require restaurants to meet our design building code and design code. Now, as a park, all of a sudden, we get a lot of trucks out here that look like anything in the world. That's why they're not allowed in many places. How do we begin to control this thing, in looking at the environment and the aesthetics of how these people park and are grouped and form this mass that I'm talking about?
We've done two things for the trucks themselves. The first is we have stated that they're not supposed to be parked or oriented in a way that blocks the view from an existing business or a sign. We've also stated that they cannot add on any type of advertising or any type of additional material to the truck beyond 3 feet from the vehicle itself. And so with that, we're hoping to address the individual trucks. With the parks, when someone wants to build a structure, whether it's a shade structure, whether it's a semi-enclosed structure, something that will kind of bring those trucks together and give a central location for eating, those would be reviewed under architectural standards, because they'd be no different than.
Conestoga wagons in a circle, you know?
Correct. Yes.
Well, I mean, what I was going to say here deals with the architecture. Will this have to meet our form-based code?
No. Only because they're not, a permanent structure would. So if somebody's coming in with a food truck park, then yes. If it is located downtown, even though it's not permitted downtown, but for the sake of argument, if a form-based code exists where a park wants to go, then it has to meet the form-based code. It would have to meet the locational standards. Anything that's a structure has to meet the locational standards for that zoning district. So depending on where they are, will depend on where their setbacks are, what their height is, what they're allowed to do, where they're allowed to do it.
Yeah, well, I'm really big on the aesthetics of this thing and how these things are grouped and what they look like with respect to the neighborhood. How do they fit in? And how you determine that is we'd have to write the code such that it respects the architecture and the environment that they're in, so that we don't get these like spot zoning, if you will, where you get somebody in here that's going to be there for a good while as a park. They keep trading out these trailers and so forth, that the thing gets out of hand. The restrictions aren't strong enough with regard to the neighborhood.
The issue that I see in having a park is, and it's a thing that I think we're kind of overlooking here, is the principal requirement they're going to have is they can't dump their waste into the sewer. They've got to have a grease trap.
Right.
Grease trap costs $10,000, $12,000, $15,000. So it's not just a kind of a casual thing. It's going to have to be a relatively permanent installation there. Somebody's going to pay for this to make all this work. And that, I have some concerns about that, because once a grease trap goes in the ground, it appears to me that the function is going to be there a while. That's one thing. And the other thing that you brought up, Sam, about alcohol permit, I could see for festivals and so forth, you could apply for a one-day permit. couldn't we write in this ordinance that alcohol sales would be permitted from
The parks?
this park?
I wouldn't get into it because right now you have a standard that requires any outdoor alcohol consumption or sales within, I think, 500 feet of a residence come in through a special exception.
Right.
And if somebody wanted to locate within that radius, they would still have to come through city council for their approval as a special exception. It'd only be if they were outside of that required radius that they would not have to do that.
But for special events, it's no big deal to get.
Special events is a totally different situation. We are not regulating the special events into this. So if you're talking about a fair downtown, any food truck or any type of
Well, it
operation
depends
that
where
goes.
this is located. I'm kind of not sure what we're talking about here as far as location, but I could foresee that this would be very beneficial for special events.
Totally different regulations. We are not regulating the special event permit or anything that would be regulated under a
I
special.
understand that.
That's
But
under.
once the grease trap is in the ground, that means they're going to be there a while. And so wherever that is, I'm quite sure it's going to be located in a place where it's going to be accessible.
Although I think that they're allowing for more of the under sink grease traps now as well. So there could be alternatives that may not be as pricey or as permanent.
Well,
And
I
for
know
special events, I don't think someone's going to put a grease trap.
Bonita is very picky about it, I'll say that.
John, what I'd like to see is that if we're going to do this with the vendor parks, that we have some regulations in here that govern I guess, the orientation, order, the development, site plan development from the landowner who is allowing this, some sort of development plan that allows it to go through, the city engineer, city architect, things like that.
There is a requirement for that to happen. It'll be approved through a special exception, but if you're okay with the addition of another condition that would simply state, designed and oriented in such a way to provide compatibility with the existing neighborhood or location.
Yes,
I mean, obviously, that would need to be tweaked, but
yes.
Can I ask
yes,
a
sir.
question? Because I'm new to this thing and trying to figure out what actually our remit is. I mean, is it our responsibility to comment on the terms and conditions of this thing? Or is it simply to say that, yeah, okay, according to the comprehensive plan, this fits? And then leave it to someone else to decide all these other issues?
I mean, the simple answer is you're absolutely
So
correct.
please excuse me.
No, you're correct that the role really is to look at whether the proposed ordinance is consistent with the comprehensive plan. There's really nothing in the comprehensive plan about food trucks. There is issues about compatibility in the comprehensive plan,
I
but
think it's up to smarter people, I mean, to some smart people on the city council, the zoning board, or whomever,
Well-
to resolve these technical points.
But the other advantage is we are sort of looking for advice on this one too, from as many eyes as possible.
Please forgive me.
So even though, we could discount the thoughts, we are looking for input on this because
If you don't raise the questions, sometimes they're never raised.
No, I
That's the
understand.
thing.
Well,
And what you
let
look
me ask
for-
one more question. Why is it prohibited to put an abandoned convenience store? Abandoned.
Because when I put
Gas station, I can understand because of underwater, underground, whatever, but
because when I usually put these together, I also type into the Google bad examples of whatever it is I'm writing. And I look to try to avoid mistakes that other people have written. And one of the things that immediately came up with bad locations for food truck parks was where they had been used on abandoned gas stations and convenience stores. And so that's why that regulation was there. And if you type that in and look for images, you will find several good reasons why.
so there's rationale.
Yes, sir.
And one of the real problems with the food truck concept is that when it comes to, and this may be an issue for downtown, is when it comes to revitalization, they can be a draw to a neighborhood, but they can also allow landowners to sit on property and not put any investment. So a dilapidated building, something like that, can sit for a long time as they're getting rents, but they don't have to make any efforts to clean it up. And so try to walk that balance.
Tony, what I was thinking is it's a good time to mention these things. I know I keep interrupting you, I'm sorry. Is that when I first came on the board here, I always looked at, what is a correlation between the comp plan and the land development code. Okay, how do we begin to decide what we can say and what we do and what we advise the council to look at? Because there are people who write the land development code and they take that as a charge to do their duty. But you have to remember that the comp plan sets the objectives and the goals and so forth. So you're looking at what is making the future growth of the city beautiful and is where we want to go. When you have something that comes in here like this, no, you don't decide exactly how it's done, but you're looking at, is this the right thing, and how control should the land development code get, and advice for us protecting that comp plan from things taking place just wildly. You know, they can write anything that they need to write to make it work. We look at, is this what we really want to see? And is this what the comp plan is saying that we'd like to see in this city? You know, it's about the goals and the plans and things like that. So that's kind of my input stuff. How you begin to correlate the
Aesthetics
two.
are very important, I understand your point.
Aesthetics and compatibility.
Again, as I said, I just didn't understand exactly what our remit was, and I appreciate the fact that we're allowed to ask questions for the reasons you say.
Yeah.
To bring them up and have other people think of them.
Big thing is compatibility, and
Right,
that's what Derek says, that, how well does this fit next to its neighbor?
Yeah, that's it.
Three questions.
Yes, sir.
That was well said, thank you. Again, not having that much experience so far, is there a maximum size on the mobile food trucks, or even when they become a food park? That's the first question.
What do you mean size?
Length.
Those are permitted and licensed by the Department of Transportation.
So a food truck could be 15 feet long.
No, there's something in here, isn't there, about the size of the truck? I misread it.
Correct, but that's when you're talking about adding additional material to it, generally for advertising purposes, whether it's menu board, signs, whatever.
Whatever is allowed.
Yes, sir.
Second, would these regulations hold true in a private developer's area?
They would be for everybody.
They would be
They would apply across the board.
across the board.
Yes, sir.
I assume many of these changes were precipitated by the beer company's problems.
Partially, yes.
Would any of these changes alleviate their concerns?
They would have to come in, well, yes and no. The only reason I say no is because they have not obtained actual permits yet, because there's not a process for them to do that. But what it does do is permit the location for them to have food trucks. And so the food trucks that wanted to operate there would simply come to our office, show us that they've had their inspections and licenses, and say they wanted to locate at that location. And as long as there was no more vehicles there than were permitted, and they were located in the areas that we had permitted, they can be there.
Which that particular beer place seems to satisfy that requirement.
Yes, sir.
What about the complaints by the neighbors, which are more than 500 feet away naturally?
That,
Has that been
the way that
addressed in any way?
well, partially, and partially it would be addressed through code enforcement. The way that it would look at it through the permitting stage, council has made a distinction between locations for vehicles that want to go in excessive parking spaces, meaning above and beyond the required number. Those can be done administratively. Anything that is located in a required parking space would come before them for their approval. So if, let's say for the sake of argument, that facility needed 20 spaces and they had 25 spaces, and they wanted to locate these vehicles, food trucks, in a way that did not take more than 5 spaces, they could have that location provided or approved administratively. If there were issues with that, we would then address those through code enforcement. But of course, as they're going through the permitting process, people can always call our office, and even if it's administrative application, state they have concerns. Obviously, it's easier to come to a public hearing and voice your concerns to the council, and that would happen anytime somebody wanted to have a food truck park, or if somebody wanted to go into a required parking space.
John, we have a new regulation where when new developments of a size come in, they have to have 2 neighborhood meetings within 1,000 feet, I think, of the development of the property. Would this be applicable?
I know that there's conversations on the council as to whether it would be and what the advertising would be for it. I know that several council members have concerns, so I'll simply state probably. They have the ability to exempt it, or they have the ability to increase those standards for this type of application, and I
That has
think,
come up, right?
yes, sir.
All right, do we want to make a motion to approve this?
I'm anxiously awaiting.
I make a motion that we approve it as
I second.
presented.
Take a vote.
All right, let's go ahead and take a vote then, please.
Sam Vincent,
Aye.
Linda Schwartz,
Aye.
Chairman Maturo,
Aye.
Rick Sims,
Aye.
Robert Bornstein,
Aye.
Anthony Rascio.
One little comment I make real quick. When we started the planning commission some years ago, we had a charter. And the charter always said at each meeting that the role of the planning commission was to discuss and comment on the following ordinance. There were three things: investigate or something, and discuss and comment. And about 10 years ago, the rules changed, and where it said our job was simply to review for consistency with the comp plan. But prior to that time, and what our charter says when we set this up, and I helped set it up originally, that we were to review, discuss, and make comments on the proposed ordinance. So
And I can make this.
that's what I've always done in my mind.
Your first order of business is to determine whether what's being proposed is consistent with the comprehensive plan. If there are strong feelings, if there are suggestions, if there are things you want directly addressed with the council, we've addressed a second motion to include those concerns or suggestions or whatever they happen to be. You know, this is not the first time the question's been asked, as you can tell, and I guess to complete your actual charge and then to address some of the other concerns, we've just looked at it as two separate motions.
John, if I may be so bold,
Yes, sir.
I can sum it up in one sentence. We're here because the state mandates that we're here. We have zero teeth. We have no bite.
Well, in following that, I can say, I assume that some of the council members read what we recommend.
Yeah, here's my advice as a city attorney and a risk manager.
The risk manager, okay.
Don't ever recommend denial unless it's based on the comp plan.
At least you could put a flea in someone's ear, right? I mean, that's the point.
Make all the comments you want, but don't recommend denial.
Yeah, that's,
Sleep better at night knowing that we did our due diligence.
yeah, absolutely. I would just hope that they would take some of these comments
I need
to heart and, you know,
your
say, hey, that's a
approval-
good idea, let's talk
Approval
about
of the minutes for 123.
We didn't take a vote yet, I don't think. Did we?
Yeah, we did.
Oh, we did, okay,
Okay.
sorry.
it. If
Anybody wanna make a
you-
motion?
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes of 1:23:20.
And I'll second that motion.
All right, those are approved then. Our next meeting is,
It says 123, or no?
that was the approval of the minutes. So, yeah,
It'll be 1:23:21.
March 12th.
March 12th. Okay, and again, I'd like to welcome our new members. Thank you for being here.
Yes, yes.
Thank you for having us, as
Well,
I
I
said.
think you're going to be a great addition to the board.
All right.
Well, that was fast.
Yes.
Don't mess around.
I have to ask you fellows a question. The difference between a staff attorney and a city attorney